I'm Shane Getson, and I'm joined here today by my good friend,
Eva Chipiuk.
And the reason why I did that is I didn't mess up your name that way. So I've been calling you Eva for a bit. And, the goofy thing with that is I messed up my wife's name for the first 3 months we were married as well. And she corrected me. So we've been married 21 years, but she told me if I didn't get it right after the 3 months, that was going to be it. So I'm a slow learner, but once it hooks, it's there.
It's okay. It happens all the time. No problem.
So thanks for coming in, by the way, and we're hanging out in the office here today. We ran into each other at a couple of different events. You have a unique story, and we were just talking off camera here about your interactions actually in a constituency office way back in the day. You want to carry on with that conversation?
Yeah, sure. And I love the story because it was kind of my introduction into what politics was to an extent. And so I used to work at a constituency office at my local MLA's office. He was a Polish-Ukrainian guy. Yep. So, of course, got to know him through those connections. And I got a summer job at his office. And when I started with him, he was in the Liberal Party.
Okay.
And
well, everybody can make mistakes.
Yeah, well, and it was in Alberta, so we've had
that was a big mistake.
Quite a destiny, a dynasty of the Conservative Party. He realized that he wasn't going to get very far very quickly, so he actually it just became independent. He decided he had to change, and then he ran as a Conservative, I guess, in the next election. I don't recall how all of the pieces happened, but the story that resonates with me on that is that he had so much support from his constituents, regardless of the political stripe. There were always tons of people coming into his office. And he was always there helping people through their problems. They would come in crying, they would leave smiling, and that's what resonated with me.
Nice.
A real people person trying to help, the public out. And that's what that has always resonated with me as what an elected official is supposed to be. And I haven't seen that apart from a few exceptions more recently. Yourself included.
Oh, well, thank you. I wasn't sure where that was going there for a second.
I thought I'd throw that in, or I'd be making my way out.
And thanks for coming out. No, and that's part of it too. Like I think a lot of it with talking some of the older legacy guys, that's where it was.
Yeah.
A lot of things that I've observed over the last while, they've been very polarized.
Yeah.
Even, the simplest thing right now is getting beat up in the media and pulled one way or the other. And, oftentimes, I think what's being used here, and, correct me if I'm wrong, we've seen a lot of stuff in the last number of years, but when you get people emotionally charged, they turn off their brains. We revert back to the lizard brain side, and in some of that, you can control people a lot more. Mm. So if we keep people fighting amongst each other all the time and that hyper-partisanship, that's easier. I don't think that they're doing this by chance. And unfortunately, with our system, it is partisan. There is that. But don't mean to give a plug on our side, but we're trying to bring that down. At least as the whip, I'm really trying to bring that down. Our committees, it's all party members into it. We want to keep that decorum as much as we can in the House, but we want to make sure that we're engaging folks. It is honest and genuine. Like, people are tired of hearing just the standard corporate canned package. So if we can connect with folks and have meaningful conversations, and even doing what we're doing today, showing a little bit of ourselves, where maybe we can demystify and get rid of the boogeyman a bit too.
I think we have to. I think we've come to a point that it's gone too far, and it's certainly done on purpose. Even I saw a clip recently of Prime Minister Trudeau using that playbook, saying that this works. Divisiveness and attack politics works. Yeah. So it's not by accident. Well,
it might work in the polls, but it doesn't work for the country.
100%.
Yeah, you get people tearing at each other, and it's not good. But so I think we're in agreement there. We got to keep these connections going.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now? How did you transition out from those constituency offices doing that, and then where did you go next?
Well, that was a long time ago. But at some point, I decided to go to law school. Okay. And the story that comes to mind about why I decided to go to law school is my mom, who was from Poland, got 3 traffic violations. And I went with her to...
Heavy right foot, or?
No, it was like wrong license number. Like, my dad had put on the wrong sticker on the wrong car, something like that. And then from what I've seen, sometimes the police are really good at handing out 3 tickets they'll find something else. So she had 3 tickets. She didn't have too much of a heavy foot at all. And I'm like, oh, I'll go to court with you because I can help you with your English isn't great. And we got into the courtroom, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. And then the prosecutor was very dismissive, and he just said, pay half of it and you'll go away, or like, you'll be fine. And we're like, but so did she do something wrong? What's going on here? And so I just thought it was so uncomfortable, and I didn't want to be in that position again. So I'm like, I think I'd like to go to law school for myself. I had no, big plans of what I was going to do once I went. I just thought I need to know my rights, so I feel a little bit more comfortable in the system that we live in.
And how old were you at that time?
Well, I did 5 years of undergrad here in Alberta, and then I decided I needed to travel the country and try a different city and school, and I ended up in Ottawa, of all places.
Kidding. How long were you down there for?
3 years law school, and it was a great place for law school because on the first week we were in the Parliament. We had a tour. We were in the Supreme Court and had a tour there, and some Supreme Court justices were coming to our classes and talking. And actually, going back to the division, I wasn't very exposed to federal politics in Alberta. Like I said, I worked with my provincial MLA, great guy. And, where Alberta is very far from Ontario. That's one thing I realized again when I drove back from Ontario. Yeah. Ontario's very large in itself.
It takes a couple of days to drive across Ontario. Like, it's a big province, too.
It's so big.
Yeah.
And a few of my colleagues in law school, they were very involved in federal politics. And just looking, and I wasn't big in federal politics, like I had said. And one was a very big supporter and involved with the Liberal Party. One was a huge supporter, very involved in the NDP party. And one was very involved and supportive of the Conservative Party. Okay. They're all from Ontario. And we hung out and got along very well together. And that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
And that just resonated too. Like, what happened? It's like the last, I think, 10 years that it's just gone.
Well, it was interesting. I was at an event just a couple of days ago over in Beverly, over in the transit there, and sitting down having some supper, and some folks had asked me to talk about the APP directly, which I obviously, farm kid, absolutely, you're buying me a steak, I'll definitely have a conversation. But it's that sitting across the table and having that conversation. There was a lady there, and you're trying to figure out people's leanings or sides, and we kind of got into it a bit. She actually apologized for being an NDP supporter for a number of years ago, and I'm going, well, why are you apologizing for that? She goes, well, I'm not now. She says, it's not my NDP that it was, and I agreed with her. Yeah. So there's something to be said with the political parties and where they stand. Yeah. And if new membership comes in, you can lean or move the needle within those parties. And she said it very well. It's not Jack Layton's party anymore. It's not the way it was. That she says, I haven't moved. I've still stayed the same. Yeah. They've moved way left of where I'm at. And she says, now I think I'm conservative. So we talked about a bunch of different policy items, and I don't think she was wrong. Like the thing where folks are getting fixated, and if you have that chance to sit across the table, identify what the problem is. Mm-hmm. We might have different ways of getting there, and that's for some weird reason we're getting hung up. But what is the problem? Let's figure out a solution to try to get to it. And it was an honest conversation. Talking to some of the older hands that were in the house here too, it used to be like that. Mm-hmm. You used to have those conversations. So interesting to see that you saw it down there as well.
Yeah, well, there we were able to have those conversations and still, be respectful about it. And how things have changed recently, that's just what I don't get at all. But it's interesting. I think you hit the nail on the head there too, is what used to be seen as the NDP and their values and beliefs has changed dramatically, and the Liberal Party as well. Conservatives, I think, by default as well have moved. But where I see the conversation has changed a lot, at least this is my view of it, is more recently it's been what people are looking for in terms of personal autonomy versus state intervention. Yeah. And so that's where I see, at least with the NDP party, they've become very clear that they're looking more at state intervention to deal with things rather than personal autonomy. It's not even whether the values are anything else. And Liberal Party, I'm not actually sure where they're at federally and provincially. Well, you see where they are. They don't exist right now.
The other thing I've started to see too is like some of the Liberal folks, and again, it's not Paul Martin's Liberals. It's not even Pierre Trudeau's Liberals anymore. It's a different animal. But I've seen people here, and I shouldn't kind of giggle about it, but I have. They're distancing themselves from the leader and the brand because it's become so different and so unpalatable, especially out west. And then a bunch of other folks now, I think they've kind of got buyer's remorse. They're seeing where this is going. And some of the stuff that's coming out, like you talk about the freedom. I haven't met so many people in such a long time that have actually picked up and moved and came out here, since the times we were building a whack load of pipelines back in 2009 through 14. I'm meeting lots of people every single day that are buying properties, moving out here, doing those things because they are, to your point, Eva, they're getting concerned about personal choice, freedoms, and municipal, provincial, and federal overreach. What are you seeing? What are you hearing on that?
Oh, 100%. And it's interesting to see the overreach of different government. And that's where I'm really keen to see where Alberta is going with it, because I just saw recently and where I'm coming from too is, since I started getting a little bit more public attention, I've recognized that a lot of people are just confused about civics in Canada and what role and responsibility the city has versus the province has versus the federal government. One very clear example to me, and I put this out publicly, is Mayor Sohi here in Edmonton made a statement about long-standing territorial and religious war in the Middle East. And I don't think that helps the conversation. I, in fact, think that causes more heat and concerns for local police when statements like that are made. He doesn't have a foreign affairs department to advise him on this. That was a very personal discussion and statement he made as the mayor of Edmonton. And I think that it's not good to do that. And the province, many people don't know that cities get their roles and powers from the province. And then recently I saw that Alberta had taken some steps in the town of Chestermere that was also abusing its powers, apparently. And I think that's very important. I think that there's a reason that there's this division of powers. Of course, Alberta is doing a lot with the federal government right now, and I think that's fantastic. I think that when everyone's kind of meddling and messing in other people's business, it's just causing more confusion for everyone. There's, that saying, too many cooks in a kitchen. I'm always the worst with the sayings. So whatever that saying is, that's the one. But that's what I've been saying. And if people just understood basic civics, I think we would just be 10 steps ahead in the conversation and not like we're just going in circles. Yeah, and the goofy thing is, like we all used to. You took it in school, and everybody did a tour of the ledge when you were in grade 6. If you could make the school bus on time, or however that worked out, you're here, you got to do that. We talked about municipal, and we talked about school boards, and you talked about federal and areas of authority. Somewhere along the line, those lines got blurred. Oh yeah. And myself, I'm not the most astute person on civics either. I have to go back and look at these items, but honestly, I knew that the state, being Canada, the country, and the province were on level playing terms. But over the last number of years, for me even, I found my vocabulary changing and those lines blurred by the information that was out there and how it was being presented. I had to catch myself and go back. Like when we were looking at, the Sovereignty within the United Canada Act, that really made everyone brush up on their civics again and look at it. Yep. The MGA, the Municipal Governance Act, is straight ahead. For some reason, that brainworm with the information or disinformation that was out there, that started to needle its way in too. So to your point, I think we need even a brush up. Even if you think you know it, go check it again, because a lot of things that have been happening over the years are definitely blurring the lines. And that's something I'm trying to offer right now. So I do have a civics class for exactly that reason. And I think the other thing is, sure, there's misinformation and disinformation, or lies, if we could just use that word. I'm not in the house right now, I can say that. But also, it's very complicated. It's not like the easiest system in the world. And sometimes you do have to have those challenges to then get it right. Because just recently, the 2 Supreme Court decisions came down, although Stephen Guilbeault,
the guy that climbs towers.
Yeah, and
that
he,
guy.
And he thinks the Supreme Court decision is just an opinion. If you want to tee off the Supreme Court judges, that's one way to do it. Is say
the
your
judiciary
opinion
is
doesn't matter.
Separate from the politicians and where we make the laws for a really good reason. Our founding fathers got that one sorted.
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, I think it's important for everyone to brush up on it. And I just realized the conversation, unfortunately, I'm not happy to say this, but just was at such a low level that we need to elevate the conversation in order to then be able to have these discussions that we're talking about, where we're not just yelling at each other, but actually having those open and reasonable, respectful conversations again.
Well, and maybe let's do that right now to walk folks through it. So here's my farm boy understanding and being in here. So the province and the state are at the same level. The roles and responsibilities, it's almost like either a marital thing or a roommate or whatever. You're disseminating who's taking care of different items within the household. And by the way, you got some siblings, which are your other provinces, but typically all the siblings are created equal under it. So you're all kind of broken up the same way. Way back in the day, way back when I'm older than the Constitution, I think, or whatever we signed off in 82. Lougheed and everybody fought tooth and nail to make sure there was clear delineation when it came to resources, et cetera. Even power generation, which is coming up most recently. Mm-hmm. So that's the relationship. It's actually a partnership within the Confederation. When it comes to the municipalities, it is a traditional parent-child relationship. Mm. All of those fiduciary duties that are in the wheelhouse of the provinces are then allocated downwards. So under the Municipal Governments Act, or Governance Act, I should say, that's where the roles and responsibilities come in with the cities. Even the big ones with million-plus populations, they still fall under those acts. Yeah. And that's where some of these lines get blurred with the elected as well. And the feds, depending on the party in power at the time, they know that full well. They kind of like to jump the queue and go around the back end. And oftentimes that's where it gets really blurred there too. School boards too are also children of the province under the School Board Act. So again, you've got different levels of municipal type governance that sometimes run astray as well, and the emotions and the feelings and the people and everything else get involved. And where we're getting cross-threaded with some of their federal partners, we want to work with them. And everything we've done so far is to affirm we believe in the Constitution, mm-hmm. and it's a good fence policy, and it's also understanding that good faith policy, those contracts. Is that kind of, am I right in the right wheelhouse?
Yeah, I actually really like how you described the relationship, like siblings and then parent-child. But it does get a little bit complicated, and that's why it wasn't in court. Certainly there are certain jurisdictions that are separate, but then where the challenge came up is the environment. Yeah. Because that's more national, more statewide. And so that's where they were saying that, well, because of the climate issues, then we have authority. So we're going to be able to take on some of this away from the province.
Where do we prove this? Like, this is the one that drives me bonkers. Yeah. So the climate.
Yes.
And the carbon tax drives me really bonkers. Uh-huh. So, and this is just, again, farm boy looking at the damn thing here. We had it thrown out in the provincial court because they basically called it a Trojan horse. It goes up to Supreme Court. It then sides in the favor of the country, saying, yes, it's because of the climate. There was no test to say that it actually did anything for the climate.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I know which one you were talking about.
Well, on the carbon tax itself. So when we're talking about the climate file, where that goes back and forth, and there's this conversation at the Supreme Court level of the environment, if federal jurisdiction indeed has an overarching involvement with precluding any participation or authorities of the provinces. So when you do the test through the judiciary system, there's one test that someone with an engineering background or a technical background would go, okay. Mm-hmm. The what you're looking at is supposed to fix something, but there's no empirical proof that it's actually doing anything.
Yeah.
So how is it judge that it works if it has never been tested to actually work?
Yeah, well, that's a good question because I haven't seen that one. But I think in terms of the jurisdiction, I think what the Supreme Court would have said, and again, that one I'm not familiar with, is that the federal government has the authority to take that tax. And that's where I think they've been having this overreach for a long time. And one...
it's like the Seinfeld episode. You can take the reservation. You don't necessarily have to keep the reservation or give the car to the person when they need it, but they can take the reservation.
Yeah.
They can take the money. What they do with it, if it does anything, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, well,
but I don't mean to be leading you, counselor. But.
Well, where I wanted to say it gets complicated with the sibling relationship is that the way things were set up here is that the money goes to the vast majority of the tax goes to the federal government.
Yeah.
So then when it's siphoned back, I guess, to the provinces, there's conditions like healthcare is meant to be administered by the province. Yeah. But they have to do so on a budget, and quite a bit of that money comes from the feds as well. So then there's conditions and requests put on by the federal government. So it's like a much older sibling kind of bribing you, here's $10, but you have to also like clean my shoes every day.
And, even though that wasn't the original deal.
Yeah.
And then the kick in the pants for us is for every buck we get back from our older sibling, it costs us $1.30 because he's actually stealing it from our piggy bank in the first place.
And you have to clean their shoes.
And clean their shoes.
Yeah. So it is a bit more complicated, unfortunately, than that too.
Yeah.
But I do like the analogy. Still.
Well, people can boil it down in their household. And I don't want to take full credit of it, but it was this hour has 22 minutes. And it kind of made me laugh my backside off because it kind of showed the relationship between Alberta and Quebec, as a married couple having problems.
Yeah.
But at the provincial level, which is funny, we don't have those problems at the provincial level. Typically, it's at the federal level where everything gets really messy in the federal politics again and starts to mess things up.
Well, and I kind of alluded to it, like Ottawa is so far from Alberta, from Edmonton, and it's really hard to provide regulations and rule. I didn't want to use that word, but govern, I guess.
King George had a problem with that back in
exactly.
The colonies a while back.
Well, maybe our friend Justin Trudeau is a bit of a ruler too. But it's just hard to govern such a big country that's so diverse and different. And then on a more local level, like it doesn't surprise me that there's less problems on a provincial level. Like it's a lot easier to get everyone together for one, talk about issues, see each other. And then it's much easier on a municipal and a local level. And that's one thing I've been trying to get people to remember and realize is that you can affect change at a local level so much quicker.
Big time.
But if you look at voter turnout rates at a national level, it's generally the highest. Provincial level will go down lower, and on a municipal level, it goes down at the lowest. And so we focus a lot of our attention on federal government while kind of disregarding these other levels of government that are very important as well, and where you could much affect change a lot quicker.
Agreed. And I think we saw up in, I think it was Thorhild County, or it was up a little bit north of us there. There was an oversight, I guess, when they were looking at land use bylaws. And all of a sudden the fit hit the shan. People were really concerned about, fencing things, property being taken from them. A bunch of other things had morphed and got in there. And that's when local civil politics really got hyper intensified, and a lot of that stuff was coming across my desk too.
Oh, wow.
So even though it wasn't in my constituency, folks were reaching out going, what in the heck is going out on this, those two hills, or I can't remember. But anyway, I'm really tired and running. I'm 4 hours of sleep from last night.
Yeah.
We went
Tell
pretty
us
late
about
for session.
last night.
Oh, I just want it to end.
Happened.
It's like the day that doesn't end. Well, we finished the fall sitting last night, so we only went until midnight. But by the time, everything amps up, you're down at 2:00 in the morning. And thank goodness. The first session, that was kind of the norm. So my old bones now these days, I'm glad it was just one day, but it still takes a bit to recharge. But the folks were reaching out, looking for help on that, but it was a municipal file. And again, explaining that relationship to them. They're asking, how can you allow this to happen? And I'm going, well, you voted them in. These are your people. So show up at those meetings, show up in those meeting rooms and affect change. And lo and behold, it did. But to your point, until something goes sideways, no one realizes it. And if you are asleep at the switch and the bus ride's fine, and even the bus driver's sleeping in the back, it's not until you start hammering on some guardrails that people start waking up. And heaven forbid we actually go over a cliff. So maybe here's our guardrail moment.
Yeah. And another important point with local politics, you just said it, but I want to highlight it, is you can actually go and speak to the councillors
Yes.
at a council meeting. You cannot do that at a provincial level. You can't stand up at the legislature and say, I have a point of order as a constituent, or
Yeah.
at a federal level. But you can do that at a local level. So you could
Yes.
go face to face, ask questions, put in a submission. And I think a lot of people just aren't taking that opportunity. But when they do, I've already heard excellent results. Some people are like, I went there, we stopped this thing that was happening in our area. I'm like, wonderful. That's the whole point of democracy. And that's something people don't understand too, is that it takes active participation to keep a democracy healthy. If you're not involved in democracy, what's going to happen? The people in charge are just going to do what they want. That's what happens. It's human nature. And I had a chat with the Honorable Brian Peckford a while ago, and he said this in very simple terms. Democracy is hard, hard, hard work. And I remind people about that.
Well, I kind of put it, use it or lose it.
Yes.
We're in democratic atrophy here right now. So if you don't start flexing your democratic muscle, use it before you lose it.
Yeah.
Because there are others that, if you're not competent enough or you're not participating enough, then why do we have them at all?
Yeah. And it's gone so far that some people are like, oh, it all has to come collapsing down and ending. And I'm like, and then what? Tell me, per se. Will you be involved then? Because if you're not involved now, how do you think you will be involved then?
Well, and the other one too is on my side, you'll get a bunch of people through Dandrup. Well, you should do this. Really? Me and who?
Yeah. Oh,
like, I'm one person here.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, you want to do this. This is a team effort. But I do have some good news, like with our little group, and we ran that campaign out in our area, and it was like, for me as a new guy, it was pretty cool, because I was one of those people going, I'm PO'd. Now I've got to get in here. If I can't help it as a voter, then I got to step up a bit more. So I got involved, did the same thing. So that same thing replicated through this last election cycle. One of our this local lady from Onaway, she stepped in, was our vice president of coordinating volunteers. Beautiful lady, fully charged and energized and helping out. And, everyone was pitching in, and it made people feel good because they were involved in the process.
Yep.
There was a by-election that came up in our town. And she asked me, should I run? Absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah.
Because the same folks that you were working with are the same people that helped you. So lo and behold, door-to-door knocking, doing all the things, canvassed the whole town. She got in.
Yes.
Margins were tight because it's a local little civic election. However anybody shows up, and it's, kind of like who knows who in the zoo, and it's all, kids in the sandbox, so to speak. But she got in because she did the groundwork. People knew what she stood for, and now she's in, and she's going to affect change.
It's so great. And I'm with you 100% about you're only one person, and same with me. And I constantly have people saying, you need to do this. Why haven't you talked about that? Number one, I'm doing it kind of all pro bono, just this public advocacy. And I'm like, I can't change the world. And we should not be looking for some hero to come along, which is a Mariah Carey song as well. But to save the day, like, we have to pull up our socks and do it ourselves too. Like, that's why we're in the position that we're in. Yeah. So I've been trying to, and that's why I called the foundation I started Empowered Canadians, because it's about elevating them instead of just like looking for somebody else or getting somebody else to fix the problems. Because that's only going to last it's a Band-Aid solution anyway, if it's even a solution.
Well, and one of the other ones, I'll have a bit of a segue into it as well. But, it used to be a strongly worded Canadian would write a strongly worded letter. And then they would sit there, and that was good. They've done their part.
Yeah.
And then, we had some elements take place where a bunch of strongly worded Canadians jumped in their trucks and threw some flags on and drove across the country.
They sure did. So
now we've got folks that sometimes think that all you have to do is have a protest every couple of years. Well, that brought it to a focal point. That was the log that broke the dam finally at that point. And where I'm challenging folks is, don't lose that, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But if you're with the process all along, hopefully we'll never have to get to a point like that. I don't know that we're there, but hopefully we'll never have to get to that point again where everyone digs in hard, gets out of their comfort zones and does that. I was very encouraged to know that Canadians are still around, that you get that fuse lit, like, we've had enough, we'll change it. And people noticed right around the world when we did it. But if those same folks are engaged and do that little work every day, pull up your socks, do that little part, take a little bit of time, be engaged in your community, know what your kids are being taught in school, make sure you're there, ask those questions, do those things, make sure those stupid little bylaws that don't make sense, go to that town council meeting and tell them this doesn't make sense, knock that off, do that. yeah, it'll go a long way, and maybe we have a chance before this bus goes over the cliff. We can just nudge that bus driver and get him
I'm
awake.
with you 100%. And I'm just curious though, like how often do you see constituents? Well, you're, I think, a little bit different too, because you are quite engaged, but do you have a lot of...
I don't have any social disorders where I can talk to people.
I don't know what you're talking about. Do you have constituents like calling you? Because one question I've always been getting is I'm constantly writing or emailing my elected official and they ignore me. And I did have that with my
Depends
federal
if they write
MP.
chain letters.
Well, see, that's the thing. And
If
I know,
if I get
agree.
spammed with
Yes.
1,000 letters, then
Yeah.
the same. It's like, if you don't have the common
I
courtesy to give
agree.
me something, you're just going to tack your name on. And I'm sure it's great for letter writing campaigns, but I'm not sure everybody else. But if somebody sends me a handwritten letter, I'm all over that in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody takes the time to pick up the phone and call, it may or may not get directly to me, but it's coming into the office and we're filtering through that. Send an email, perfect. Spam me on some Facebook Messenger or some text. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm supposed to answer you at 3 a.m. on some Facebook thing. Like, that is the absolute last thing. So if you're looking to get a hold of your elected, yeah, they have an office.
Yeah.
I've got an office in the Ledge here. I have a constituency office. I have phones. I have a website that's specifically for the constituency things. Emails, phone, letters, absolutely. You chain mail me. It's like those letters that used to go around, those chain mail letters.
Yeah.
That would be the
Last one.
close towards the bottom ones that I would get to.
Yeah, so I've been kind of giving the same advice, although where I did change a little bit. The advice is I was suggesting that if they're not hearing directly from them after a few personal attempts, that they should tag them online as well. Because
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because that's one thing I learned when I was in Ottawa, and this was shared by the city manager at the time.
Okay.
Because what I didn't realize, I went in there naive, like, I just want to help these people that are in the largest constitutional crisis Canada's ever seen. And for them, it was politics. And so the city councillors were heading in for a municipal election less than a year later. And so they were already positioning themselves. And they were all watching what they were saying and what was being said online. So he actually told us that they're getting a lot of information from Twitter, and what's being said on Twitter is affecting their decisions. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I think there's an opportunity to use it well. It's not like, yeah, just tag. But what I've done recently with my elected officials, and I did hear back from my provincial representative, but not from my federal one yet. I wrote an email to them directly and asked my questions and stated my concerns. And then I posted it publicly as well, saying, because I also want to encourage other people to raise their issues in a respectful manner via email, and then following up however you need.
Well, and sometimes
Yeah.
be patient.
I've been waiting 3 years for my federal
That's way
MP.
too much patience. Yeah, no, that wouldn't. But what I'm suggesting is, folks, is like, if you give me a week, like, and here's the other one too.
That's reasonable.
Yeah, but you have to put an urgency to it. And I get folks, and no word of a lie. Like, I have we need a crash course in the civics thing. I had one individual send into my office, mad as a hatter because he had a magpie in his tree that was making noise.
Shane, get out there.
Right? And I said, like, I don't know how to do this. I'm going, like, well, shoot the friggin' thing. Like, probably not what the MLA is supposed to do. Like, what do you want me to do? Shoot the friggin' magpie. Get a pellet
I'm a
gun. I don't
farmer.
care. Like,
Yeah.
So when you have to weed through that stuff
Yeah.
too, but if you are persistent, make sure you're there. The other thing that I do personally is, if I give you if I give you my card, my physical card, it has my cell phone on it. And if the elected are working properly, they literally are supposed to be your advocate. There's a difference between the government, so the cabinet members, the ministers, and there's a difference between the government elected people, cabinet ministers, and their ministries. The ministries themselves are the machine. They outsurvive all the whole electoral cycle. So there's a couple different elements here too. Just because you get a wrong answer from a person in a bureaucratic position in one of those departments doesn't preclude that answer being elevated to your MLA or to the minister, because that's how that works. I often feel like we're the dude with the big brush following the parade after the elephants walk through.
No.
Like, that's your job. When there's a mess, you're cleaning it up.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I don't know. So don't come in swinging at me because I'm actually on your team first. If they approach their elected that way too, it typically helps. In your case, I have no answer. 3 years is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I do think it was because of the role I played in the last 2-3 years. And so, yeah,
what was that? What did you do?
Well,
What did you do, Eva?
I landed in the middle of the largest constitutional crisis in Canada, and I took on representing some of these truckers and other protesters that were just quite frustrated with their government and were looking for some answers, which I think if you just distill it down to that. So now you
become political kryptonite.
Like, still to this day.
Okay.
A convoy lawyer, this and that. And it's like and what is really interesting is that there's some criminal lawyers that had to take on some of these files because some of these people were criminally charged. I'm not a criminal lawyer. I don't know the first thing about that, but they said that they've represented rapists and murderers and pedophiles, and they've never received as much hate and people calling into their office about representing protesters in Ottawa.
Well, and then this is where it got weird, right?
Yeah.
Like really weird?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and this one was hard for me too to figure this one out. So how was it that typically would a misdemeanor charge mischief? I mean, in my mind, a bunch of kids get out, high school, toilet paper your teacher's, not saying I ever did this, toilet paper your teacher's tree out front, you get caught by the local constable, mischief.
Yeah, really mischief.
Like, what is the cause of mischief? Because that's what I would assume something like this would have been.
So since the protest in Ottawa, I've been asking what was illegal and when did it become illegal? Because what a lot of people don't realize, because they didn't see it, is every day, more than repeatedly throughout the day, protesters were having direct communication with the police, including myself, as representatives for some of the protesters. Every day there was a discussion of like, okay, what are we doing? How can we work together? This and that. And if there was a request to move some trucks or something, the people that we were working with would do their best that they could to help out the police.
Well, I understood that and again, bits and pieces are coming out, right? And you get closer to the source, the folks who were there. Usually that's the truest. And then there's a bunch of he said, she said that goes from there. But my understanding is when they first started rolling through, there was a couple things. Because I was, in between being in the emergency room, getting out myself for some other things. Understanding when the trucks were first rolling across the prairies, it was being undersold. It's hardly anybody.
Yes.
There's no one here, blah, blah, blah. It's no big deal. All of a sudden, they kept getting closer and closer. All of a sudden, this is real. Like, you can't hide the truth anymore. There's a bunch of folks that are moving across the prairies, and they're going to be on your doorstep in a couple of days.
Yes.
My understanding is that everybody was new at that point, the police and the town and everybody else. They started kind of telling them where to park initially to try to put them in different areas. And then it was after that there was a bunch of them that they had to move. And even I believe that the city mayor finally did something really unconventional. They actually spoke to the people in the protest and asked them to move, and lo and behold, they moved. Is that
almost
accurate? Okay.
Yeah. So one good point that you made is that throughout the transport from the west, they were being escorted by local police.
Okay.
So you would think that they have that kind of intel information about how many people it looks like are coming. So at the public order emergency inquiry, it was what I found, what I learned through that inquiry, and this is not something I'm pleased to say as a Canadian, but that protest revealed incredible incompetence at every level of police authorities and every level of government that was there. So that's the starting point, pure incompetence. And again,
incompetence or communication?
All of it. Really, the first 2-3 weeks was, she said that department was supposed to do it. They said this. And we were sitting there as protesters, representing the protesters in that commission, just like, what are we doing here? I didn't have enough resources. Their intel this, that intel that. And and that came up as a huge issue, how long the protesters were planning to stay for. So the Ottawa City Police, for some odd reason, assumed that this large mass of trucks were coming, although it took them 5 days to drive there. They thought they would be there for 3 days and just pack up their stuff and leave, when no information was indicating that. And that's what the OPP was saying. None of the information was. So again, it was like, well, he said, and we were doing these intels, and it was just like not something you want to see from police authority.
It kind of takes away your,
Yeah, which we're paying for. And also it's available for the entire world to see the level of competence that we were dealing with. So that's the starting point. By the time the convoy from the West came, and these were some of my clients, they got in on Saturday. And in front of the Parliament, Wellington, there was already a large group of Quebec truckers that had taken up most of Wellington.
Okay.
Another important point to consider before is the trucks and the clients that I represented from the West, they were under the understanding that there were locations set up for them to bring their trucks.
Okay.
They're coming from Saskatchewan, Alberta. Some have never been to Ottawa. They were told it was this park name, and I can't think of it. They realized which park it was. It was, the size of this office times 10.
So for parking Datsun pickups or little mini trucks.
Certainly not this
Kenworths.
massive, convoy coming from the West. So, but that turned out, it just didn't happen because, again, so much just incompetence at every level. And this is the one that hit the most when I heard the story. So they get escorted throughout all of Canada and even into Ottawa. But most of Wellington was already taken up by Quebec truckers. And the first maybe 3 trucks from the convoy from the West got to park on Wellington, which, again, they were just escorted. They didn't ask to go there.
Yeah.
The police brought them there. And then the words that Chris Barber used was, then they were abandoned. The police disappeared. And it's like, so what were you supposed to do? They just found a spot to park in. That's what happened.
Huh. Okay.
And then they were like, oh my gosh, we need to do something here. So when I ended up flying in with Keith Wilson and some other lawyers a few days later, we didn't know exactly what was going on, but we assumed from the video footage and things that we saw that the city of Ottawa would take the protesters to court for an injunction to move trucks. And we're like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. Instead, a private citizen sued them for $10 million, which then changed to $300 million for honking.
So it wasn't about, it was all about honking.
The private citizen.
Okay.
The city did nothing until 3 weeks later. Again, just by the time they crossed their T's and dotted their I's, they were in court 3 weeks later. So it was just, and it was really the protesters, Canadian citizens. I'm not even going to use protesters because so many, Ottawa residents were there to help. Canadian citizens came together and were like, what do we need to do? We're here to help. And it was, okay, if we need to move. And sometimes they would move with, if there was an alley or a street or something that the police was like, okay, this one is causing a bit of a headache here. Can you move it? Everyone was there on their own free will, and nobody was in charge of anything. So if somebody asked them, they would more likely agree because they understood the goal was to stay as, for the protest.
Yeah.
But some didn't really want to play that game, and they just did what they wanted to. But they were abandoned. It was
in Ottawa's not a
mess.
big city. I was there once, I didn't realize actually how close it was to Montreal. I was down there for business. And I thought, I can drive there in an hour or 45 minutes. That'd be kind of neat to see. And then got there, everything had closed up. It was literally the biggest little small town I've ever rolled into.
Yeah.
So to think about how many folks were there, allegedly there was 15 or 20 trucks if you had followed the news reports initially. And then that obviously wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So that would be challenging to find a place to park everything.
Yeah, and these people weren't from Ottawa, so that they literally just found a spot to park and they parked there.
Yeah.
That was the extent of the organization and the brainchilds of the organizers. Nothing about it was organized. I would say often too that, to plan a birthday party takes usually, more than 2 weeks, a month maybe. Here, people are suggesting that in 2 weeks, the largest protest in Canadian history or whatever, I think it's one of the largest, was...
Well, because I believe at the time, and I don't know, but maybe this was the reason, because the Prime Minister got busy, and then he wasn't going to come out. And then I think he wasn't there, and then I think he came down with COVID or something during that same time. Yeah. And then his sniffles ended, and they still weren't gone.
Yeah. Well, it didn't help that he vilified them and demeaned them as well.
Really?
Yeah.
People don't like that.
I don't think they
Folks
liked it.
from the West get bucky about that?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. They were like, I don't think that you should be calling
I just finished driving for 5 days, and you're going to call me what?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine there was a bunch of folks that were frustrated at that point. So the other thing that was a contrast, I saw other political leaders that were walking on their way to work, engaging with them. I also saw and heard, from folks that were down there as well. And again, I wasn't there, but separations and everything else, that a lot of the local police, they developed good relationships, that they were going up, cleaning up the streets. There was folks that were opening up their stores to them. The folks that opened up their stores were protested against themselves and their own communities for doing that. Like there was a ton of that.
Yeah.
There was a little girl that I'd met, and this is already, 2 years after the fact. She was 10 at the time. Her folks were down there, and they actually had a hotel. And she came up and talked to me with her grandma at a Merithorpe event. And she says, MLA, this is the first time I've seen TV, and I don't know what was on TV because I could look out the window. What they were saying wasn't happening on TV. Mm-hmm. So this little girl at 8 years old saw the difference between what was being broadcast out there and what she was physically seeing. And she had asked, how can grown-ups lie to you like that? Pretty tough question to answer for a little one.
Yeah.
There was another little guy that came up, and he was probably 13 at the time, and he brought me up a little keychain. On one side it says Jerry can, and the other side it says because Justin can't.
Yeah.
So these are our little people that got to see this. How in the heck, again, our court systems, everything, all these mechanisms we put in place, a free country where you've got more access to information now than what should be now, except for those last bills that got passed where apparently I can't see what I need to on the internet anymore either. How can we have let the civic responsibility, being quiet at the switch, to see it degrade to this point where you can't trust what's on television, little kids can see through it, the emperor has no clothes, and you've got people being charged with what I would think as a common citizen misdemeanor being treated way more severely. How is this working out? And as a politician and as a dad, I'm really struggling with this. How did it get here, and what's next?
Yeah, I think it was a failure on all levels, to be totally frank, because I've been asking myself this question a lot. Was it the judiciary that failed, elected officials that went too far, lawyers that didn't step up, citizens that weren't engaged? And I think on all fronts, nothing worked. And like institutions like the media has failed us maybe the most, because they're the ones that are responsible generally for bringing accountability and transparency to elected officials and what they're doing. And they have done basically the opposite of the role that they're supposed to do.
And I can tell you full well, as a newly elected, 6'2", 230, I'm invisible depending on which media outlets there or what I say. Like it is absolutely wild, and I never would have been able to say that until I got into this business.
Yeah.
I used to be very naive, I guess, of looking at what was on the news and seeing that. But again, from my understanding, that's changed over the last 10 to 15 years too.
Yeah. So I think that maybe that's the largest failure, because they had the largest response. And again, it's like they've done the opposite of what their role has been. And just going back to what you said about the two kids seeing what they saw in Ottawa, rather than giving my own experience, I was gathering evidence for the public order emergency inquiry of people that were in support of. That was one of the things I was doing. And there were a couple clan mothers that were in Ottawa at the time, and because I was quite busy doing all this.
Like Indigenous clan mothers?
Yes.
Okay.
I was busy with the clients and like going to court and meeting with the city and things like that. So I didn't have an opportunity to be on the ground very much. And they certainly were. They had an opportunity to talk to a lot of truckers and were making their rounds. And so I was asking for her statement, and I was going through it with her and getting it ready for the public order emergency inquiry. And they'd been fighting the government and the system, their whole lives. That was kind of what they're doing. And she said how she described the protest in Ottawa was it was the first time she experienced true reconciliation in this country. That was what was happening in Ottawa.
No kidding.
Yeah. So when she said that, I was like, shivers down my spine. I was like, yeah. And yet they're painting it as the worst people doing the worst things.
For folks that are familiar with this, no big deal, right? But for outside, like here was our thing. And I've talked to a bunch of, American colleagues and friends as well. And when you describe to them what took place, they didn't hear that something was wrong in Canada until that happened. Mm-hmm. And then Joe Rogan kind of picked it up. Mm-hmm. But how much more Canadian and patriotic can you get? The symbol of a protest was a hockey stick wrapped in our national flag.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that became...
people dancing.
Right.
In -30, it was cold out there too. And one other meeting that I had with city officials, and there were there was a superintendent of the police there, and he actually had the nerve to say, "Couldn't you guys come in like July?" And I'm like, "You're going to your warm house. You're working from these people are outside. Like, you're getting paid for this.
Yeah.
This is your job anyway."
Yeah. Well, and then I started getting phone calls, and again, far removed from that. Folks from our province that were concerned because they were there and they had kids, and then they heard they were going to start coming and taking kids and those type of things, like the fear that was put in place. And don't get me wrong, blockade critical infrastructure and those type of things, like we passed a law here to knock that stuff off. It was happening all across the country except for Alberta.
And you had that ability to.
And we took it in place.
Yeah.
And we ensured that the police understood that they had the autonomy to do that, that was the right thing. And in Atchison, it was my constituency again too, which was pretty wild. So in my constituency, this protest came, and it was happening all across the country. The first one in Alberta that happens is in my constituency. They blockade the railroad tracks by Highway 60. There was literally that same day, before we even got the legislation off the press, or off the printing press, so to speak, and the minister and the premier had signed off on it, reaffirming that laws still matter here.
Yep.
That counter-protesters went up and they dismantled the stuff off the tracks. The police were there the whole time. The police did their job, and they knew full well that the law still applied. Mm-hmm. From my understanding, that clear delineation wasn't there in Ottawa. It wasn't necessarily there in some of those border crossings as well. Mm-hmm. And when you start messing with our number one trading partner, there's eyes also, as I spoke to folks in Milk River on that one, mm-hmm. you're messing with their trade and commerce as well, like the superpower in the world. So it's not just a local thing, guys. So once they understood that, it was a little bit of a different conversation. So from what I had seen, those interactions were pretty decent. The police had it under control. There was a line of sight. To pull something off the shelf that's typically used for a state of war, you already said there was a bunch of incompetence going back and forth. Your words, not mine, so I don't get in hot water on that. I would hope it would be levels of miscommunication or lines of authority and control, but they had the tools at their disposal to do what they needed. I saw that happen here full well in my own province when we had to deal with it a couple of years prior to that.
Yeah.
What is your sense on that? Like, did we need to have the thing that we usually declare war in another country brought off the shelf? 100%
no. And that came out at the Public Order Emergency Commission when that was the thing we had in evidence. 100% is nobody asked for the Emergencies Act. No police authority asked for it. And there were other tools that they could have used to clear Windsor, for example, and or even move the protesters in Ottawa. So there were other mechanisms and tools that could have been used. And it was just, again, this strange, I don't know what it was that went on, because right from the start, even the information of how they thought that they were just going to come for the weekend and leave. So even though they had clear indication that that wasn't it, that the mandate of the protesters was, we're not leaving until the mandates are done. So you can't be any more clear about that. If that happened over the weekend. And one thing I want to remind people is nobody wanted to stay there too. It's not like
it was fun. It wasn't the summertime.
Well, it was fun because they made it fun, but nobody wanted to be in the middle of a town in minus 30 and, they turned it into a good time. They were making the best of it. But the moment the mandates would have dropped, they would have been out of there. So that's one thing people forget. And so much of it was just so organic. So whatever happened here in Alberta was just totally unrelated. And whatever was happening in Windsor was completely unrelated. And at one point, the Ottawa City Police, when we started talking to them, they said, because we were talking about some streets in Ottawa that they needed cleared out. And so they said Kent and this one other. And then they called us and they said, what about Windsor? And we're like, which one is that? A north-south or an east-west? And they're like, no, Windsor, Ontario, the bridge. And we're like, we don't know what's going on there. Like, we're just trying to deal with what's going on here. And so they were thinking that this was like some kind of mastermind. I'm not sure where their intel was coming from, because it just seemed so wrong.
Well, I think, and again, from my two bits of looking at some of it, I think people thought that it was being orchestrated and organized, because that's what they're usually trained to do. One of my colleagues had put it differently, not politics, right? This wasn't a protest. This became a movement.
Yes.
So when you've got a bunch of people that are working in a kind of sort of coordinated way, but they're not. They're all individuals. No one's signed on to this. Yes. No one's coordinating. No one's whipping them, telling them what to do. They're literally mad as hell, and they weren't going to take it anymore. Yes. And this was one of the things that they felt compelled that they could do and do in a civil society.
Yes. Yes. And they were coming together with a common mission. And again, that was where the truth and reconciliation came. I think that's why they felt that was happening there, because everyone understood the goal. Everyone was there for a peaceful protest, calling attention to what the federal government was doing, and provincial governments at the same time. But that was, and so everyone just banded together and everyone did what they could. If somebody needed, shower system, Ottawa residents were offering that to them. And every time the government could have taken a decision, they took the wrong decision. And that's one thing too, that when they basically stole fuel because there was no reason to take fuel away. I don't know if you saw that, but there were just
people jerry cans,
walking, and some were filled with water.
Ones.
Yes, because they were like, we're going to get through this, whatever they were going to do. And another very important point that came out at the Public Order Emergency Commission, well, two that I think are the most important. One is the Ontario Provincial Police Chief Intelligence Officer. He said that the lack of serious crime was shocking. In 3 weeks' time, there was just I think 13 arrests, and we don't even know who those were, whether those were just Ottawa residents fighting or whatever. We never got those details. You see a Stanley Cup playoff in Vancouver, the last one, over 300 charges, I think it was, in one night. So put that into perspective, what was really going on. Look at the facts. And then one thing that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, or enough attention, was CSIS warned the federal government not to enact the Emergencies Act.
I didn't realize that.
They said that it will cause more extreme views, because the reason people are here is because they're frustrated, they're lost trust with their government. Don't invoke it. And what did we do?
So there are grown-ups in the room. I mean,
At
our
times.
Our spy agency, that's...
and then they kind of turned to, that was...
I found recently, again, with CSIS, and this is interesting, sorry to take this too.
Please.
And I kind of put it to other folks, when some of these concerns about China was taking place, that you had to have a whistleblower from CSIS to actually put it publicly in the press, because the government at the time is not listening to their own secret service, their own spy agency. This is wild.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it was very eye-opening. Again, I use the word incompetent. I don't say it with pleasure. It's sad. I think it's very sad that Canadians are paying the amount that we're paying in taxes to uphold this incompetence.
Well, you've given me a lot
bad.
more to think about.
Sorry.
No, it's good.
That's why I really enjoy the Alberta fight against the federal government. I think for many reasons. One, because of that, I think in a country this size, we really need to start focusing on more local level and how we can affect change there. And then we are only as strong as our weakest link. So if Alberta is strong, I think it's great. There's different ways of helping other parts of the country that doesn't have to be done through the federal government. It could certainly be done differently.
But it's wild. Like, with our system, and what I found, and I explained this to a few other folks, which was just bonkers when you look at it. Private industry is easier for me to pick up the phone and talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. Within the government, it's difficult to pick up the phone and talk to the person adjacent to me. The best traction I ever got was going outside of my country, down to a conference, and then talking to people that are at different levels in government.
Really?
From provinces, so we could have a conversation in a foreign country, so I can talk to people in my own country, so we can actually get something. It was the economic corridors. So instead of going down to the Calgary Stampede during the leadership race and everything else, I just boogied on down to Wichita, met with a bunch of people down there. Saskatchewan guys were awesome. There was like 20 of them there. It was like me and another guy that was it for Alberta that we're representing. And I ended up rubbing shoulders with a bunch of these different folks in these different committees, and then all of a sudden we're talking about the corridor model and working on that. Next thing you know, they're my advocates, they're reaching out, and I'm running into a couple of ministers from Manitoba, and literally it was the course of 3 or 4 days that I mapped out how we could move our stuff and get corridors put in place from here to Manitoba. Roll the shot clock forward a year and a half. All of those interactions and meetings I had down there over that 3 or 4 day period got us a memorandum of understanding signed. I wouldn't have had that opportunity to do that as a private member if I didn't jump on a plane and go to a foreign country to talk to people from my own country. This is how convoluted a lot of this has become.
Well, then it doesn't surprise me if it's that convoluted. Why, I see like the final product is not as competent as we should hope it to be.
We're working in silos.
Yeah.
So everything else, I think, to your point, when we work collaboratively regionally, so we work on that, and you look at your adjacent neighbors. And when I'm looking at my stuff, I keep saying Northwest Canada, and that includes Alaska. So all of a sudden you start tying in that region. That's your traditional trade routes. That's your traditional rivers, and everything else kind of runs that way. Mm-hmm. You're right. We are an anomaly when you go full east to west. That's a long stretch.
Huge.
The U.S. has similar things, but not so much. They had this shooting match when they first got themselves to... And again, coming back to the thing fact in 1982, that's when we have our Constitution signed, literally. Mm-hmm. We've never had to fight or struggle for the things that we are now. We're starting to get into it. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth fighting and struggling for. But you have to have the conversation, and you have to be able to pick up the damn phone, and you got to be honest with yourself. To your point earlier, if we could stop all of this stuff from happening and unwind the clock, maybe it would have started with people getting off the couch at home, going to those little local meetings and saying, no, we ain't doing it. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, like I said, I just think that there was a failure on a lot of levels. And I don't think we could put the blame on one, but maybe a little bit more responsibility on
Sounds
the media.
Systemic.
Yeah, but like with citizens as well, with elected officials as well. I think it was pretty easy for them for a while too. So part of what I'm hoping to do too is make politics cool again. Because then I'm hoping that citizens get more involved. They're like, ooh, what's happening? What's Shane up to this week? And I think that maybe politicians, and I don't know, maybe you could share your insight. Did politicians and elected officials do it on purpose where they made it just so dry and boring that people stopped paying attention, do you think? Or whose fault is it there?
Well, how about the geeks in the class, the nerds? The nerds that couldn't get in any sports team or do anything else, they end up doing policy. There's a whole pack of nerds that have been doing this for years, and the nerds end up running the world. Like, I'm oversimplifying, right? But if you don't think that this stuff is dry and boring, like you're a person of law, not everyone's going to pick up a docket and go, wow, look at this subclause section 5A.
Well, that is boring, but I think we could make it more interesting, make it more cool.
And here's how you make it more cool.
I want to hear it.
Okay. See what you can do in your own backyard.
Yes.
Start with that.
Yeah.
So if there's something that you can positively affect change, then do that. The other side is, I don't know, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm only doing it for a little while. I am more than happy to pass along the baton. Whoever else wants my job, step on up. I'll teach you exactly all what I've been up to. Here you go. God bless you. Mm-hmm. Because that's what the other guys in my area have done. When I meet the ministers and I meet the former Speaker of the House, longest standing Speaker of the House is my constituent, these guys are still engaged all the way through, and they had mentorship along the way. We've kind of lost our way in that regard. So it is a community. To your point, get out and do stuff. I know there's people, there's politicians, they may not be the best coordinated or anything else, but they got the best social media, and my God, they're the best ones, and you're going to vote for them every time, regardless of what they do. Hey, this one guy, he's incompetent, but he's got great hair. Why don't we make him our prime minister?
I think I was going to say, I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but there's part of it. So, so make politics cool. Well, the really cool part about it is you can actually do something. You can affect change. You can be, using myself as an example, someone who can have an impact like that to get these corridors put in place, to have the name, literally the name of a ministry changed from transportation, like it's been for a number of years, to now transportation and economic corridors. You can literally do that within 3 to 4 years. So in the provincial level, you can have that type of impact provincially and interprovincially, municipal level. That I'm almost envious to a degree. Municipal politicians can 100% be themselves. There is no party line. Be yourself. You can literally, and using it as an example of a couple of big mayors in these big cities, you can get paid more as the city mayor than you can as the premier of the entire province.
Really?
Right? We don't get paid much when you look at the responsibility and the things you're doing. So it's not for the pay. So how do you make it cool? Do cool things. Try to get cool things done for a bunch of people, and then keep that moving forward. So I would say engagement, be yourself. If you're bold enough to be yourself, it's pretty cool. And then try to always make sure you're leaving a legacy. Like a legacy, whether you want to look at having your name on a bridge, I think that's pretty crappy. Don't do it that way. But the legacy of having the bridge for people to drive across and connect with other people across the road to bridge those gaps, so to speak. And I'll keep running that analogy until it gets really boring. But those are the things. That's how you keep building and moving forward. And to me, making it cool was the same thing John A. Macdonald did when he ran that line across the country, pulled it together. That's what I'm trying to do again. If I can have a gateway that goes up to the north, if I can pull these things together, if we can get trade going to Europe and we can do all these things, and Northwest Canada thrives, literally thrives, I don't think you'll see those type of things, and it'll emblazon and embolden people again to say, I've had enough. This isn't what we're doing. No, here's our rights and freedoms, and let's get it done. Become Canadians again. To me, that's what kind of makes it cool for me. The other one is, if you've got interests, share your interests with others. I've been an advocate now for firearms vocally on the podium for 5 years. Been an advocate for aviation for the same time. You get to share your interests and do those things and represent people that may not have had a voice before. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So, I think that's something that is important for us to be doing, and elected officials to be doing it. And I think I didn't think of how citizens could be doing it as well at the same time. So I think that's a great point.
Well, if you organize, and let's say as an example, right, and you've got 20 people are concerned about the pothole on their street. You're going to go fix the pothole? You're going to go tell the person to fix the pothole that should be fixing it, or what are you doing? Fix the pothole. We've also, for some reason, and you kind of opened up with it on the political schema, right? It's somebody else's job. Who's paying for it? Well, the government's paying for it. No, it's your money.
I know.
The government is the most inefficient way, or actually maybe it is the most efficient way, to take $1 and turn it into 20 cents. It's phenomenal at that. So just get up and do something. And that literally is the art of politics. If you look at Abraham Lincoln back in the day, he was nobody, born from nothing, dirt poor, worked his way through it, wrestled people literally. One wrestling match was a surveyor, got into law, did these things, stepped up. Like, there's no magic secret sauce. And that's pretty cool if the system works. Anybody can lead. And we've seen anybody leading at this point.
Yes, and that's another point I've been making is there is no us and them, apart maybe for the Laurentian elites. That's a different category.
Oh, we've got our own elites too. Like, as well. Honestly, there's different areas.
But on a local level, that is not happening. These were your neighbors that were then elected. And so I find that conversation very, it's not even reality too, because a moment ago they were you. And so that us and them conversation, I think, needs to go out the window. And because like I said too, I've gotten a bit more of a public profile now, and I used to wonder myself too, why haven't more people stood up? Why haven't they?
Public shaming.
That, but also, holy jeez, PG, you can't do anything right.
Oh, no.
Like, people from every side will attack me personally for something. And I'm like, I am not your elected official. I am not your lawyer. I am just Eva Chipiuk that lives in Edmonton, Alberta. What do you want from me? And the attacks are insane. But yeah, you get shamed, but a lot of them are very silly. But the attacks from all sides, like you can, and that's where I'm always, now I'm wondering, it being an elected official, I know is not an easy job. And then sometimes I wonder too, why they're doing it. And you alluded to it, the pay isn't great. And I very much agree with that.
I took about a 60% pay cut to do this job.
Yeah. And I think that's something people don't realize.
My wife hates it right now going into second term.
Well, I think people need to appreciate that, because if you want your country or your province or your city run well, and CEOs are making $1 million or more, or $500,000 even, and you want those kind of skills to be part of how you're running your public purse.
Well, and so part of it too is the skills. Absolutely, you want the skills, you want the proficiencies. You want a mix of both, though.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, if the system works, and the system does work. Like, if you use the system, it works. I have to believe that, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. Like, it still has to work, right? Typically, it was the best representation from those folks in those areas and community. You by electoral representation, you're putting your faith, you're hiring somebody from your community who's the best from your community to best represent you, your community. Even if you don't vote for that person, they still represent you. That's your team. Cheer for the home team. You know, that's part of it. So whatever that region is and how it works, that's your representation. I've seen that in our own political party. Like, we have to run nominations. Just because I'm the MLA doesn't mean I'm the MLA next time. I have to run another little mini election. So I have to go out and meet everybody again in my own little party to vote me in. So I have to win that first. And then I have to go out and meet everybody else in the area running against other candidates from their parties. And it was interesting to see the different areas and regions. So if you look at somebody from central Calgary, they're different than me. We're cut different. If you look at my friends and neighbors up the road, we're similar. You get more towards different areas, we're different. Each one of those communities represents them. So I think that system still works.
Yep.
Where I would challenge people is, don't buy the window dressing. If you're having candidates that are really good on social media, but when you go to try to have a meeting with them, they can't look you in the eye or talk to you. They've got a social problem. They can't work well with others. They're okay. Maybe they're not a great public speaker, but if they can't represent you, if you can't look them in the eye, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
And right now, what you've seen over the years is people tapping into your emotions, ramping you up on outlandish things, and you're turning your brain off. You're turning off the best thing. You got to take the time to get the right people. Then it works. Like, honestly, I have to believe it still works, because otherwise you wouldn't have had somebody who had no inkling towards being a politician other than getting mad as hell and I wasn't going to take it anymore, and knowing full well that I had to look myself in the mirror, and then I also had to look at my wife and kids and said, yeah, there was a chance to fix something and I didn't do it. I'd be having a full beard. I wouldn't be looking at him. What kind of a husband or a father would I be if I didn't step up? And this province was really good to me. Gave me a lot of chances that wouldn't have had it except for here, just to go for it. So that's what I did. I went to go for it. And once you're in that position, Eva, yeah, absolutely. Everyone hates you. You're the target, and we've got to figure that one out. You got to remember that actually, once you got that person there, that's not the target. That's your team. Yeah.
And I'm with you. And that's why, I'm trying to elevate the conversation, because if we can have a respectful, open conversation, it shouldn't matter what political stripe you are. But like you said, that's your representative, and let's work together and let's see what we can accomplish.
Yep.
Let's be adults. And I think that's where I'm
Hold them to account, though.
Yes, of course.
But here's the other one. If you got somebody that tells you all the answers and everything you want to hear every time you talk to them, really? I'm not that person. And some of my colleagues, which was funny because I looked at it differently too, I honestly felt this polling was BS. like every other indicator, right? If you're following the polling down, and here was the logic test. Okay, so the media is not my side? No. Okay. So does media form people's information and shape their minds? Yep. So we don't control the media? Nope. And the media makes people think certain ways? Yep. And the media is 100% against us? Yep. So why are you polling the same people that are getting influenced by the media? Crickets.
Oh.
But that's how they do it. Where me, I was the old-fashioned politics, like the gentleman you'd worked for before. I was out in my area. I was talking to people. I was doing that. People may not agree with me, but they know where I stand. And if they know something's wrong or whatever, I'm going to do the job you hired me to do. And do we agree? No. Here's what I think. And they're okay with that. Because usually we agree on most things, but they know if I'm digging my heels in or I'm not doing that, they know there's a good reason. And they also know if I'm not comfortable with a position, I'll have town halls and get people's opinions. If it's an area that I'm not comfortable with, I'll do that. It's not easy. It's genuine. I don't see my wife and kids lots. And you try to figure out other ways to connect with people so you can get that message out there. It takes work.
It does, and I think at least it gives us an opportunity. I think over the last 3 years when everything was going sideways too, it's also given us an opportunity to do things that probably we wouldn't have.
Gets you out of your comfort zone.
Well, and
I never would have had a microphone doing this before.
That's what I was just
I never
about
even had a
to
camera
say.
in front of me, first doing this. Yeah, but
so because the media is doing whatever it is doing, it gives you an opportunity to share your own message your own way. And I think a lot of the things wouldn't have happened had it not gone so bad throughout this COVID time. Like I think, I've seen lawyers that have started.
You don't know what you got until it's gone or almost taken away from you.
100%.
Yeah.
And it was comfortable and it was nice. And then it's like, just a second here, what's going on? And you know what? I was recently at your AGM meeting, and how many people spoke up and said, I'd never been interested in politics at all. I didn't even vote. And then they're at a meeting on a Friday night there, instead of being at home. So I'm like, I think it's great. That's where I think we could make politics a little bit more cool and engaging. It doesn't have to be boring and dry. And of course, reading Hansards and stuff is not great, but having town halls, engaging with people, getting that community spirit back.
I love that too. I love dovetailing on existing events. I love showing up and talking to the kids, and I love, hanging out and talking about airplanes. The other thing I like to do is when we do events, we always kick back to a children's organization or community. What drives me bonkers in the fundraising, you have to, because all you're really doing with the fundraising is buying media time, which is kind of a weird cycle when you really think about it. But what I like to do with our CAs, we will take money, but we try to give back, and we support those communities. I was at a town hall out in Evansburg, and we were talking about what took place literally with the fires that took place. And this one lady out there was concerned because she didn't have insurance, which is, another item. But she had a bunch of dead trees in her place, and there was, no one to take it down, and it was going to cost her so much. And I said, well, I've got a truck, I've got a chainsaw, I'll help you. And I just went to the room. So there was 80 to 100 people. Who else wants to help this lady? 10, 15 hands went up. There you go. We'll help you.
Yeah.
That should be the part of, if we can be the tip of it, maybe it's not the coolest thing, but leading by example.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that 100%. And I there's these community halls and things are happening, and I've been trying to encourage people, well, maybe what you could do is say, okay, this is the issue I have. Maybe 10 people will agree with you, and then you could come together on that issue and see how you can make change. And an example I have been giving often now is Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD.
Yeah.
That wasn't the government that made those rules.
No, those were people.
Mad mothers. That were like, we're not going to have another one of our kids die in a drunk driving accident. And they got organized, they got strategic, and they worked together until they saw change. And now we're just like, well, the government is corrupt and they didn't do anything. It's like, no, pull up your socks and get to work.
But who's the government again?
I don't know.
Right? But that's it.
Yeah.
The system
You're
works.
the government.
Yeah, it's you.
The power is you. And we saw that.
Yeah, and that's part of, I think, the sinister reality of where we're in, and it's an elegant design. We'll give you this, we'll take away that, we'll give you a little bit more of this, we'll give you that, and you make them dependent.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden you've got every government program. It's easy. All you got to do is, and if you look at the amount of taxes we pay here in this country, it's brutal.
Correct.
So what are you getting for return on your investment?
Yes.
if you're a consumer, you're getting ripped off.
Yes.
So make sure you're getting your bang for the buck. And overall, and if you can do it yourself, why are you hiring your brother's, sister's, cousin's, uncle's neighbor to come over and fix your tap? Fix your tap.
And like I just said this recently too, because I had just made a statement about the public health care and the quality we have. I made that statement today and somebody wrote, move south. And I'm like, that's not the point of it. And another thing I find so crazy and odd, and maybe it's
the healthcare system's terrible. It's absolutely the worst ever. We've got all these waiting times.
Yes.
You want me to fix it? Don't touch healthcare.
Yeah, don't. And not at all. And it's like, how do we make it? I'm not saying that we should disregard it. How do we make it better for everyone? And this is the other point that I was going to say, going to what you were saying. We don't get a bang for our buck.
Nope.
But will anybody complain about that? Not many, or make a statement or get organized. But if I've heard that if you buy a thing of butter from Costco for like $2 or $3, whatever, and you don't like it, people will return it.
I've seen that.
And I'm like, you're going to go and return a thing of butter.
One fuzzy apple in a box, and they're up there, they're returning it, but they won't.
But your government, you're giving them, I don't know how much.
Yeah.
You're getting poor quality health care, and you're not going to ask for a refund, or can we make it better? You
get great health care when you can get in there. Like, we did a comparative analysis. Like, our docs and our nurses are good. They're trained well. They're proficient. We've got a ton of things that impede, I believe, more professionals getting into it quicker, and those type of things. When you look at how they used to train, it was different. It used to be more trades-oriented, practical, hands-on, mentoring, all those things. That's kind of gone away to a degree. And a bunch of people are going to get mad at me for oversimplifying again. But the biggest bang for the buck, and in the words of an emergency room physician, we've made a calcified, cash-hungry monster, which is the administration side. Mm-hmm. So the changes that we're making is a reorg. Mm-hmm. When we looked at Germany as an example, pretty decent system, and I would hazard to say a harder left than what we are. After being there, back in October, I can tell you that coalition government, they're doing a lot of good stuff. Their tendencies are further left of center than what ours are, for sure. In their system, you've got cutting-edge technology, really good service and everything else. And in that environment of a more socialist, I would have to say, system than what we have or would be comfortable with, they run it with 60% less overheads. Mm-hmm.
I know.
Where should we start? Yeah. It's not that we don't put enough into it. 42% of our budget. At the one time when I really got in hot water for asking silly bugger questions, if we were getting our bang for the buck on that for our top performers, people who run the organization, for the amount that we paid them, and when we're paying more literally in Alberta at that time than our entire national defense program.
Yeah.
And people got to wait 2 years to go get their knees worked on.
Yeah.
There's a problem. So again, there's a problem. Now you've got me in place, whether you like it or not. I'm your team. I'm that team out there. I got a mandate because you told me now I'm working for you. I'm going to go fix it because you told me to.
Yeah.
So you better fasten up your chin straps, kids. We're fixing it.
Great.
That's the deal. So there's the difference to the intestinal fortitude. If I was one of those politicians that kept following those polls and the tail kept wagging the dog and all I was looking to do was get reelected, that would be an issue. Mm-hmm. With my style, with me walking the gamut and doing those type of things, and I didn't mean to talk about me, but you kind of got me going here. And who's interviewing who here? But with that style and what I did, and I'll offer folks for encouragement out there, be yourself, put your chin forward, represent, pick a team, obviously. Blue's the better color in my opinion. My numbers went up in my constituency with all the things that happened and everything else, they went up. Mm-hmm. The candidate that was running from the biggest party there, that's our largest opposition ever, didn't even come out for a debate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So can people affect change? Yeah. Be bold, be yourself. If you don't see anybody out there that you like, step up. You're that person. Tag, you're it, and get after it. Because I honestly believe that our kids and our province and our country is worth fighting for.
I very much agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting there. A little slower than maybe you and I would like, but we're getting there.
Yeah, we are. And I'm really hopeful for the next gen of kids. And every time that you see something, speak up. There was a land acknowledgement recently out in one of the schools I went to. And I've been to a lot of land acknowledgements. There hasn't been a single elder or leader or chief that would have endorsed or asked for this type of vitriol that literally came out. Yeah. Like, you want to talk about dividing people. just terrible. So I pulled the trustee to the side. I asked her what was going on. I asked the principal what was going on. They were kind of defiant about it. My kids go to that school. So the feedback I got after me making that ripple in the pond, suggesting we're going to have a meeting on this, because we're still going to get to it. They've changed it since. Sometimes all you got to do is just that one thing. There was a number of school boards that didn't want their elected officials anymore to be at graduation ceremonies or to speak. I've stuck my big size 12 cowboy boot in that one pretty hard too and said, oh no, we're doing this. And it wasn't for my benefit. And here's the ripple effect. I literally last weekend had a number of parents come up to me and say, I'm so glad that you were there for our kids. And another one saying, my niece and nephew, they were so honored to have their MLA there for their graduation. And then I had to tell them the backstory, and they couldn't believe it. These things aren't happening. It's not because we don't want to show up. Oftentimes we're getting closed out too, and we're going to need to work together to make sure that what was traditional still can stay there. And over the last number of years, a lot of things have changed. So you want to give us a hand? Yeah, it's little things like, can our MLA come speak at our high school graduation for our students?
And just having that face-to-face, having the kids see the MLA. Oh, maybe that's something I would like to do. Like, how are you going to get people involved
I love going
in
into their classrooms, like the out of the mouth of babes. So we would have the kids come here, and they still do now, and it's nice to see them back here again, but they would take the picture. Well, I may or may not be able to see them for 10 minutes in a day, literally when things are going, bells are ringing, everything else. But I offered to every one of those schools, my staff will be reaching out to you. I'd love to make time to come out to your classroom, because when I'm not in here, I can come out there, and I will take time and come out and spend an hour with your social studies class. Fraction of them took us up on it.
Really? See, that's where we have to make it cool again. Let's get this going.
And the kids ask great questions. All the things we're talking about.
I think the questions would be awesome to see and have them engage. I'd love to see kids having debates as well. And that's one thing I had an opportunity to do here at the Ledge. I think it was like grade 12.
Oh, did you do the little MLA school?
It was with the French program.
Okay, cool.
So, but we had to, we were putting a bill forward, and then we had a debate on it. And the bill I brought forward was women had to have hair longer than their ear. And the joke was I had hair shorter than that. So I was bringing a bill forward that would have made my hair illegal. And people voted in favor of it in the end. And it was just so great, because you get the public speaking, you get the debate, you get an opportunity to see how this democracy works and all that stuff. I thought it was fun. Not everybody wants to play hockey or, play sports. This is a great way. It builds camaraderie, and it gives you skills that you need in everyday life.
Big time. And I think if you have a core competency in that, like, not everyone's going to do that.
Of course.
And I think, honestly, the balance is if you've got about 25 or 30% of your group when they're in session that are like that, those are your professional politicians. I'll put it in air quotes.
Yeah.
You absolutely need them, because they understand the trade craft, and there's something to that. The rest have to be us novices that come in with different age demographics and professional backgrounds or non-professional backgrounds. Because again, the only way you can represent everybody, if you have it homogenous on one type of folks in this, it doesn't work. And that to me, that was the elegance of design. The system works. But now I'm geeking out on this and trying to talk about things that we can do. So back to you on your side. What's the next steps for you? You're working on this civics type item. You're drawing folks into that. You're still working on obviously some legacy things, because what took place in Ottawa isn't over yet, I would assume. What's in it for you for the next year for Eva? What's on the books? What are you up to?
So I'm focusing a bit on this Empowered Canadians organization. So civics courses, I'll be releasing a book very likely in the new year, which is a civics course and book which I honestly think every Canadian should read. So we'll see how that goes. I've never done that before, but I started doing handouts for the course, and I thought, these handouts, if I package them together as a book, I think they would be very helpful for Canadians to have that little refresher, like you were saying, to having a bit of a refresher. I didn't remember what was going on in civics either in grade 8. So that, and I am working with a law firm again now, and still taking on the government in a few challenges against what they've done and what's gone on over these last few years. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, well, As long as we're not throwing lead at each other and we're still talking about it civilly and doing that, it's good. But,
Well, it's important. It's important to share, like, have those challenging and uncomfortable discussions, because if we're silent on them, they just grow stronger and become divisive and polarized, I think.
And our system was set up to have uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
I didn't realize this. We were out in this event at Penmore in Saskatchewan, out in Regina, and we had a bunch of our colleagues from the States, and we went in and sat in the ledge in Regina, which was pretty cool. And we were afforded an opportunity that we don't have here in Alberta. There was 4 of us from my caucus that were there. The MLAs there extended, and through their Speaker of the House, extended us the privilege, and I didn't even wear a tie. I was wearing a suit but no tie. They let us sit on the floor with the MLAs, so that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Our colleagues from the States were up in the stands, and they couldn't believe, us quiet Canadians, of how much we fought across the aisle from each other during question period. They don't have that.
Really?
Yeah, it's a different system. So to your point, have the uncomfortable conversations, because that's how the system was supposed to be set up. When you're arguing, as long as you're listening, but you can argue points in a responsible manner, and you can be passionate about it.
Yeah.
Don't be emotional about it. Be passionate, but not emotional, because if you get too emotional or you get scared, which is frightening, and that's where we lose it. But we're supposed to engage. When I got married, I didn't marry a lady who was weak. I got married a lady that challenges me every single day. Mm-hmm. And I think I challenge her a bit too. But that's how it works, is that you're stronger because you have strong people having strong opinions. And when you can have the opinions and share it, you can oftentimes come up with some really, really, really good solutions you wouldn't come up on by yourself.
Yeah, no, I think it's super important. Another thing I'm doing is I started a podcast called Dialogue Over Division.
Oh, no kidding.
And I hope to have you on the show as well.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And, the purpose of the show is in the name. And
Okay.
I've brought on, it's a bit more like about civics and the legal system in Canada, but just having open and honest
Can I
conversations.
bring a hockey stick and a Canadian flag?
You sure can.
Thanks.
Just don't hit me with it. Yeah, so lots of different things going on. But yeah. It's been a very interesting time these last 2 years for me. I did not anticipate going into Ottawa for, the largest constitutional challenge in the world, and then cross-examining the Prime Minister. I only found out I was going to do that the night before, too.
No kidding?
Yes.
How was that?
Interesting. Like, I was so involved in it. I had firsthand knowledge, and I went into the commission as a solicitor. So that was kind of in the background, preparing evidence and stuff like that. And getting things together, I wasn't the one doing the cross-examination. But then on the last day, we had decided as a team and with the clients that it would be best if I did it. And so many people have asked me, how was the Prime Minister, and how was it asking him questions? And the only thing I can think of, and for me, what it was never about him. It was about the millions of Canadians that weren't heard, and went to Ottawa and tried to be heard by their Prime Minister. And so I was humbled to be the voice of basically millions of Canadians. And so for me, that was all I was focused on. It really wasn't the Prime Ministers. They come and they go. But
They're just drama teachers.
in that case, they sure are.
Yeah, and I'm saying that tongue-in-cheek. It's never disparaging against the position, because it is an esteemed position when it's held properly. And I think we can see the difference of when, we don't have the right folks in the right control room, let's put it that way.
Yes. Yeah. And the second last question I asked was, do you think it's the role of a leader to unite your citizens or divide them by name calling? And that's just all we saw, all we've seen. And then, like I said, I recently saw a clip that he said that's the tactic he uses. And look at what it's done to this country. It's terrible.
Yeah. Well,
on that sad note, just kidding.
Well, so maybe we'll leave it there. But definitely be on your show. Thanks for coming out here and having a conversation with me as well. And it's been fun. It's interesting. And thank you for doing what you do and for being you.
Well, thank you.
I think you're going to make politics cool again by what you're doing.
I hope so. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I just feel compelled to do this and speak up and be myself and not hide. And so some reasons I wonder what the heck I'm doing, but here I am, and I'm hoping to affect some good change at least.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to give you something.
Okay.
It's the highest thing or highest honor I can do. And when I was over in Germany on that trip, I literally started up by saying, here's who we are, here's where we're from. If you don't know what Alberta is, we're like Texas North. We're like the Texas of Canada. And that's where it started. So I don't have a Canadian flag here, but I'll definitely give you an Alberta flag today.
This one. Thank you very much.
And plant the flag wherever you go. It's an amazing conversation starter.
Will do.
Thanks, Eva.
Thank you.
Whoa, let go. Waking up the buzzard on an old black county road.